Welcome to the Wellness Roundtable, a new podcast created by the Global Wellness Institute. This is Season 1, Longevity, and I'm your host, Alexia Brue, an exited media founder turned longevity entrepreneur. Together, we'll explore the scientific and societal frenzy around all things longevity, examining whether it's a golden age or a gold rush. Before we get started, we'd like to thank our partner, Fountain Life, for supporting this podcast. When was the last time you really thought about your health before something went wrong? We're living in an age where science and technology have unlocked the ability to detect disease before it shows symptoms and take action when it matters most. That's the foundation of Fountain Life, a visionary longevity center co-founded by Tony Robbins, Peter Diamandis, and Dr. Bill Kapp. They've brought together some of the world's most advanced minds in medicine to flip the healthcare model from reactive to proactive. Fountain Life is redefining what it means to take control of your health using AI-powered multimodal diagnostics that go far beyond the standard checkup and inform a personalized optimization plan designed to maximize your vitality and extend your health span. Fountain Life has been a trusted partner of the Global Wellness Institute for many years, and we share the common mission to empower health and wellness worldwide through proactive medicine, scientific innovation, and technology. This is the future of healthcare, and you don't have to wait for it. So choose to live without limits. Head to fountainlife.com to learn more. That's fountainlife.com, because a healthy person has 100 dreams, but a sick person has only one. Welcome back to the Wellness Roundtable, where we sit down with the scientists, innovators, and investors shaping the future of longevity. Today's guest is Abby Levy, someone who recognized the opportunity in the longevity economy long before it was a buzzword. Abby held roles at SoulCycle and Oxo and co-founded Thrive Global with Arianna Huffington. Then, about 5 years ago, she teamed up with Alan Patricof, the legendary investor, and launched Primetime Partners, a venture fund dedicated to one of the most profound demographic shifts of our time. We're talking about the aging population. But this conversation isn't about silver-haired stereotypes or biotech moonshots. Primetime's thesis is more radical, that longevity isn't a life sciences category. It's a full-stack reinvention of how we think about health span, wealth span, and yes, workspan. We cover everything from Medicare math to the promise of precision pharmacogenomics. We also discuss the outsized success of older founders and what a 100-year life might look like if we really design for it intentionally. And fair warning, Abby may make you rethink your business model, your retirement plan, and why your primary care doctor really has no idea what to do with your mountains of biomarker data. We also, in this episode, talked to media innovator David Stewart, the founder of Ageist and SuperAge, on changing cultural perceptions of people over 50, as well as how mindset affects everyday wellness decisions. Let's get to it. Hi, Abby.
Good morning, Alexia. How are you?
Good. It's so great to be sitting down with you. I think the last time I saw you, you were running Thrive Global with Arianna Huffington, and we had coffee somewhere in the city.
Yes, and well and good was well and good.
That's right. It was before we sold it. So you have had an incredible career at some of the most innovative and exciting consumer companies, from SoulCycle to Oxo to Thrive Global, which you co-founded with Arianna Huffington. And 5 years ago, you started Primetime Partners, which was one of the first, if not the first, venture fund focused on funding businesses in the emerging longevity space. I would love for you to talk us through how you spotted this opportunity and ultimately came together with Alan Patricof, and maybe explain who he is as well.
I'll start backwards, which is my partner, Alan Patricof, is a renowned venture capitalist. He started Apex, the private equity firm, Greycroft Partners, Venture Capital, and in late 2019, we came together when I was chatting with one of his sons. I said to his son, John Patricof, I'm going to start a venture fund focused on aging. And he said, no way, that's what my dad wants to do. So that's how Alan and I teamed up. But to give you a bit of the backstory, I never set out to start a fund focused on longevity. I actually started with the topic of older adults because I saw this huge demographic shift. For the first time in human history, there will be more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18 on the globe. And that is, for the first time in American history, happening as soon as in the next 10 years. And so that demographic shift, really from a pyramid population to an upside down pyramid population, has tremendous impact on all areas of our global economy. And I personally felt the impact of that when my father, who was a small business owner, his business closed when he was in his mid-60s. And it was the question of what does one do in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s? And so that's how I got interested in the topic of older adults, understood this huge demographic shift, and thought, where's the entrepreneur in all of this? Mm-hmm. Who is designing for this vibrant, exciting time of life, mm-hmm. which what we call the prime time of your life? And so that's how we started the fund, was really focusing on products, services, and technologies for older adults. What evolved in our first 5 years of business, we raised a $50 million seed to Series A Fund 1, invested in 36 companies. We are now investing out of Fund 2. And what we learned, though, was that by just waiting till someone became an older adult, you really missed the opportunity to change the paradigm. Mm-hmm. And that by focusing on Healthspan and wealthspan, and to some degree workspan, which are all part of longevity, that was the orientation by which we could have the greatest impact on older adults. So that's how we kind of in some ways backed into longevity, because that was the right framing for how to have the same end result.
That makes a ton of sense. I would love to get more into the population shift that you're talking about, because I think there are a lot of headlines around this population implosion, but you're talking about the repercussions in a literal level. Paint us the different scenarios of what's going to happen.
3 main areas that can really crystallize it. One is the retirement savings gap. Mm-hmm. What that means is, do individuals have enough money to live out their lives? And as our life expectancy has increased from, 50, 100 years ago, we're now in our late 70s and we'll go up to our early 80s. In Japan, it's already in the late 80s, that the people don't have enough wealth to live that long. And that is a global issue. And so the question then becomes, how do you think about wealth span and work span? You mm-hmm. cannot retire anymore at the age of 60 and expect to have a 30-year retirement funded. It's very hard to do that. So 50% of Americans will run out of money unless we start to really think differently about wealth span and work span. So I think that's one area. A second is on health span. However, it is just the reality that people over the age of 50 consume 2/3 of the healthcare of our country. Mm-hmm. And how we think about controlling those costs is the pressure point by which I hope our system will really start to move from a sick care healthcare mm-hmm. system to a well care, which again opens up a lot of doors if longevity can be viewed as preventative care and it can be funded or reimbursed through employers and the government. So the huge cost of healthcare is the second impetus for innovation. And the third is that people over the age of 50 control 2/3 of the net worth of the country. Mm-hmm. So who is engaging this consumer? What does the experience in our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s look like? Mm-hmm. That has not really been defined by many companies yet. So we look at those 3 opportunities around wealth span, health span, and the consumer experience as tremendous ways to think about the longevity economy. I will have one piece here that you're not hearing me talk about, which is historically longevity and the term longevity from an investment perspective has been commingled with life sciences and biotech. The question of how can we have therapeutics and pharmaceuticals and medical devices that help us live longer. Mm-hmm. That is not an area of investment for Primetime. Not that we don't think that there's merit in it, it's just not our expertise, not our area. So there have been longevity investors prior to us, largely in the life sciences space, and there continues to be a vibrant world there. I think that is a piece of the longevity economy that we sit adjacent to. We focus on the data and distribution of what's going to happen when all of that longevity medicine kind of comes over the FDA approval process, mm-hmm. but it's not how we are focusing our investments right now.
And just one observation as you think about the size of this market and the people over 60 becoming such a huge segment, it's like this is no longer a niche. This is like really the foundation, right?
I think so. And I also think there's even pockets within that. Like we forget about the segmentation of, 1 in every 5 people at some point have a mobility issue.
Mm-hmm.
We used to think about that as, oh, there's just a couple people for those blue handicap spots. This is really becoming a reality of just living longer.
Yeah.
Same thing with dementia. Over the age of 85, you have a 20% chance of getting dementia.
Yeah.
That's a really high number. And so issues that we thought were small and niche, because of life expectancy increasing, become more pervasive. And if you look at Japan, that's 15 years ahead of us. It is just the reality of where the numbers play out. And so I think that's the piece that we're really excited about when entrepreneurs are trying to change the math on Healthspan and on WealthSpan, because the current math doesn't look very promising.
Thanks for sharing the distinction between the life sciences part and the longevity piece. Our listener, our core listener to this podcast is a wellness professional. I think it would also be helpful to hear how you distinguish between longevity and wellness and where the overlap is and where the differences are, because that's been a hot debate in wellness circles.
So I'm biased, right? Because I run a fund focused on this. I think everyone agrees on the term health span.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think there's a disagreement on that. And I think when you talk to longevity doctors, I don't think they disagree that their focus is health span. Mm-hmm. Their approach is to help anchor consumers or their patients or members around some metrics by which someone can gauge that. So what is your biological age? The reason why doctors are trying to use that now is because it just anchors the patient around where their starting point is and where they could get to. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just the difference, is longevity doctors are holistic functional medicine doctors, depending on what their specialty is. And they really cross a bridge between wellness professionals and the medical establishment. Mm-hmm. I think that they're a wonderful conduit with the same goals as wellness professionals, but with a language that uses the term biological age aggressively as a engagement mechanism. That's my take on it. And I've met many longevity doctors, and they fully support wellness professionals, but they want to do it in a quantifiable, measurable way.
Yeah. That's how I think of it too, is like wellness is a qualitative sibling to the quantitative longevity movement. And there's just sort of two sides of the same coin. They're different but complementary approaches, and you sort of need both.
I think so. And I also think that it's just blurring.
Yeah.
It's blurring. I think the bigger piece that's the divide is between sick care and well care.
Yeah.
And I think the reactive nature of our system, but also the way that we as patients have been ingrained to behave, which is we call the doctor when something's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's how our system is reimbursed, and that's how our system works today, and that's how we've been trained. Mm-hmm. I think the longevity doctors are in the same bucket with wellness professionals, in that this is an ongoing programmatic approach to health. Mm-hmm. And it is preventative, and in fact also the business models are quite similar, because most of it is not reimbursed, or it's HSA FSA, or there's bits and pieces that might be reversed, and there's this understanding of the role the consumer plays in making the decision to engage in functional health, wellness, and longevity medicine. So I think that's the bigger divide. And so the more that we can see the wellness industry embracing some of the quantitative, I think the better off we are.
That totally makes sense. I would love to take listeners inside your portfolio, maybe for Fund One. It would be super interesting to just hear about some of the companies you've invested in, sort of paint us a picture of the spectrum and the space that you're invested in.
So a lot of learnings from Fund One, and we invested quite broadly across many different topics. And in Fund Two, I think we have many more specific themes we're going after. So to give you a flavor for Fund One, and then I'll talk about Fund Two. Flavor for Fund One, we were very interested in social determinants of health and supplemental benefits. that are delivered through Medicare. So food as medicine, fitness, strength and fall detection, transportation benefits, combating social isolation, getting access to long-term care insurance, financial wellness, a lot of those reimbursable benefits that are really around surrounding the older adult to help them be successful and healthy. So there was a bunch of investments in that space. There were a bunch of investments on really scaling care. One of the issues we have when we have a population that is now more and more people are aging, about 12,000 people turn 65 every day. And so one of our fastest growing investments is a telemedicine platform. And COVID enabled telemedicine to be a reimbursable event. And it's stayed that way since the pandemic. So this company, OpenLoop, has really become the platform for any digital health or retailer, anybody who wants to be delivering healthcare remotely. So the infrastructure piece is really an important piece of being able to scale care. We've looked at and invested in several companies that are about increasing wealthspan, either through a new retirement product or service, retirement advice, as well as access to, again, as I mentioned, long-term care. So those are some of the spaces that we've been interested in from a higher tech perspective, because a lot of those are tech-enabled services. We have been very interested in biomarkers, voice biomarkers, and how you can use voice to detect depression. A company called Kintsugi, which again uses voice variation and vibration to detect depression. Heat sensing movement, a company called Butler that can track someone's movements and detect falls in the kind of more nursing home situations. We have invested in also in two menopause product companies.
Oh, which ones?
Both of them are direct to consumer. One's Womaness and the other one's called Kindra. And I think the space we've been playing in really reflected the learning curve and just the different types of opportunities. And last thing in Fund One, we are invested in a longevity business called Cenegenics. Cenegenics is one of the oldest brands in wellness. They have over 20 physical longevity clinics across the country. And it's an amazing journey that they've been on as one of the very few scale brick and mortar providers. Because most longevity doctors are solo practitioners or largely digital. And it's only in the past 24 months that there's really been this growth of brick and mortar for longevity and wellness. So I hope that gives you a sense that we've been very opportunistic in terms of where we want to spend time. And I think, as I mentioned with Fund Two, we're really taking what we learned in Fund One and doing a lot of thinking of where are the big missing pieces. And from a wellness perspective, I do think the data side, I mean, all of these companies are giving us access from the Oura Ring to the Whoop to Function Health and all the biomarker companies. As a consumer, we're getting all of this information now. And I have to admit, nobody really knows what to do with it. It's overwhelming. And while all of these companies say, hey, we will help you, there hasn't really been a very good data focused business on sifting through the data and on using the data proactively. So we're spending time looking at that. We're spending time in the at-home blood testing because I think we're going to get to the point where we really are tracking our blood the way that we track not sleep daily, but on a much more regular basis.
Do you think the mainstream consumer is ready for that, like to track their hemoglobin A1C? And are those the type of biomarkers you're talking about?
I think that there are pockets of the population that is ready to do that. And we need to be able, as the cost of all this testing continues to come down, that again is an opportunity to figure out how that can drive results. When you talk to PCPs, they will tell you getting your blood tested twice a year is enough. That is the standard. And that's even a lot for most PCPs, but that would be the starting point. I just think we're at a point where we're really trying all these new things, and to be able to see it impacted in your blood is one of the very few ways we're going to be able to see what's working or not working. And that is why this is going to end up being pulled through by the consumer, is they're going to say, I've now spent thousands of dollars on supplements that someone told me to take. I have no idea if any of these are working.
Yes, right.
So we're interested in that. We're interested in precision polypharmacy, average older adult.
What is that?
So polypharmacy means when you're on more than one medication. And most Americans over the age of 50 are on more than one medication.
Yep.
And the way that those have been prescribed is based on the FDA approval tests that happened whenever that drug came to market. Basic counterindications are tracked so that you don't have adverse drug events from basic counterindications. But how you, Alexia, metabolize drugs is different from how I metabolize drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is partially genetically determined.
Mm-hmm.
So pharmacogenomics is a fancy way of saying the genetics of how you process the pharmaceuticals going in your body. So precision RX, people talk about precision medicine, precision RX, precision prescriptions, is how do we take our genetics, our blood biomarkers, our behavioral health, and how does that influence what drugs we can and should be on and in what doses. So right now is a reimbursable expense by Medicare for polypharmacy, those older adults on average of 8 to 10 medications.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking about, we have concierge medicine, we don't have concierge pharmacy yet. So we're very interested in that space.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's an example of something. There's a few startups that are working on this, and it makes sense. We're trying to personalize everything that we eat with our gut health and all of this kind of stuff, but we're not actually taking a deep, deep look at what's been prescribed to us.
Right. I mean, one person does fine on a statin and the next person can really suffer on it. And how do you figure that out?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going through HRT right now.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the genetics would not help me with HRT. That is a bit of a trial and error. But even figuring out how we help individuals trial and error medications, supplements, or anything they're putting in their body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to become even more relevant because right now there's 7,000 drugs under development and under review process with an FDA, 75% of which are specialty drugs that no one's seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot. And that, again, that doesn't take into account peptides and supplements and all the other things that the wellness industry is going to populate.
So it sounds like that's an area that you guys are exploring, as well as that need for a platform to upload all of this data that our Apple Watches, Whoops, continuous glucose monitors, et cetera, are creating, and figure out how to give the consumer actionable advice there.
And wellness professionals and all of the specialists. And I'll tell you, a colleague of mine, she took her Function Health data
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not picking on Function Health. You could pick any company, but she took all the blood biomarker data and brought it to her PCP, who just said, what would you like me to do with this?
Right.
And it's like the industry just doesn't know how to digest the information, not even the consumer. Mm-hmm. So I do think what we're looking for what is the data analytics platform that can be professionally focused. That's where we're starting, because we think those are the right folks to be able to take the insights and support an individual in their decision making.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when you guys had that epiphany that you needed to start reaching the consumer a little bit earlier. When did that happen? And is that thesis now a Fund 2 thesis?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that probably started like 2 years into Fund 1 in 2022. And it actually was because of menopause. When Alan and I started the firm, we actually in our initial marketing materials, do we say it's 65 and older? What's the number we're putting on what our target focus is? And we were kind of going back and forth. And then I saw a bunch of these menopause deals. I was like, wait a second, this is reaching women in their 40s. And then we were looking at some retirement related deals. And we're like, well, if we want to focus on making sure people have enough money in retirement, that means you need to be talking to 30-year-olds because they're the ones who need to start putting money into their 401ks. And so it was menopause and retirement, those two issues where I was like, wait a second, we need to be actually thinking about aging as a lifelong process. And if we're wanting to make sure that the end result when we are older is to live
independently,
exactly, all these things, then we absolutely have to be looking at businesses that can move the needle. And that could be a wellness business that is age agnostic. And it could also be retirement products and services focused on young professionals.
Yeah. Because it's like you're starting way too late if you're starting at 65, essentially.
That can be the case. And so it's interesting that in some ways we have broadened the aperture, but we've also figured out how to be more focused as well. But I think that there's also many other funds that have started since we've started who are thinking about this. Most venture funds have the silver tsunami. I put in air quotes because I hate anything silver with the word silver because it's so ageist. But most venture funds in any category will have this as one of the biggest demographic trends and investment opportunity. So we've invested with over 80 other funds. It is an area of immense interest. I think we're still waiting to see many big businesses being built. And so that's where this time right now is just an explosion of startups interested in this. We look at about 1,000 startups a year that fit both of our investment themes as well as our stage of seed to Series A. And that doesn't include then so many pre-seed deals that we just don't look at yet.
And have you had any exits yet? I know that the time frame in venture is really, really long, and you guys only started 5 years ago. But obviously people are eager to see exits in the longevity space.
We have not had any exit yet, which again would be very unusual to have, especially in this market. It's a challenging time from an exit perspective. We've had 18 of our companies raise follow-on capital. Our portfolio is marked up, so things are growing. We have our first unicorn. One of the companies valued at over $1 billion. So things are all moving in the right direction.
Can you share what company that is?
That is the telemedicine platform OpenLoop. And of the 18 companies that have raised follow-on, they're really across the board, but most of them are B2B. And so I think one of the areas that might be interesting for the audience is direct to consumer still is a very hard channel. It is a hard channel in any economy, but it's a hard channel particularly focused on some of the preventative health. And for us, on any business that targets a consumer who's an older adult, we've seen that as a continuous challenge because fundamentally, individuals think that healthcare should be paid for by their employer or by the government. And I think this consumerization of healthcare is an affluent person's reality, but there's only so deep and so far those pockets go. And so that's really been, I think, an inhibitor of the growth of the space is relying on the consumer to pay month by month, et cetera. And that's just a structural issue we have.
And do you think that healthcare ends up absorbing this, learning from the longevity sector, and this essentially like upgrades what our healthcare experience is? I mean, as you and I both know, this will cost the US so much less. This is a global audience, but we're talking about the enormous healthcare spend in the US, right? Obviously, we're spending it all on sick care, and longevity is more around preventative. So do you see us finally getting smarter about how we're spending dollars and doing it on funding these longevity services?
I mean, listen, we need a lot of policy change, right?
Yeah.
Like the number one culprit to longevity is our food system. I mean, if Americans didn't eat so poorly, we would really have a different health profile. And so some of the current or incoming administrations talk around we're going to penalize the food companies for polluting people's bodies. I think until we get to that point where we are changing what we eat. And so I more say this because we need policy change to pave the way for these wellness businesses to not only get reimbursed, but to be able to support individuals. So I still think the biggest lever is policy, reimbursement, and all of that. That being said, I do see an opportunity when I think about all the value-based care that is trying to figure out having the medical provider share in the risk and the upside if their patients are healthy. So moving from fee-for-service to value-based care, I think is a real opportunity for wellness professionals because most providers will say, okay, if we're really going to be on the line and financially responsible for this person's health, we have to start thinking about all the ways to support them, to reduce stress, to improve sleep, to get them to move more, to get them to eat better. All of these things that we thought were just kind of outside of our purview, we now need to try to influence.
Gotcha. Okay. Are there any particular technological or scientific advancements right now that you think are real game changers in the next couple of years? I mean, AI is sort of a obvious table stakes thing. I don't know if you want to comment on other things that you see coming that are going to be game changers.
So it's really about the application of AI because AI to me is like saying, can you run a business without Excel? No, you can't run a business without a financial model. So AI just is, you point table stakes, it's just how all businesses are going to use AI for multiple pieces of their business. I can give an example, which is there's a company that a colleague of mine just met that has raised several $100 million, and they are basically serve as the memory for someone.
What does
That
that mean?
what they mean is that they basically, the technology ingests all your information from documentation, from reading your emails, from all these things, so that if and when you have dementia, you can ask this AI companion, what's that person's name again? And with a picture that you just took. Or, I need to call my daughter, but I can't remember her name. Or,
Wow.
where did I leave my keys?
Uh-huh.
So imagine that we are basically going to be able to access our data. And that's the whole point. AI makes it a lot faster and cheaper to access
Mm-hmm.
information and to sort through it and to get to the right answer. Think about how that could really help someone with memory loss.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you think about AI, not just from the productivity lens, which is most companies are using it to become more efficient, and it's a great use case, but from this sense of we all have all this information, whether it's our blood to our memory, how
Mm-hmm.
can AI unlock that? So I think that part is really interesting. I think the technology around voice and having our world be voice activated. I know Amazon Alexa obviously has gotten us started there, but for people who have mobility issues, which is going to be a large portion of our population, being able to be productive in other ways, I think is very interesting. And then I think the real impact on how quickly we are able to do clinical trials, the impact on biotech and life sciences has already, the pace of innovation has changed so much in the past 5 years, it's only going to increase. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying we're going to have a cure for cancer, but I'm saying that the supply of solutions
Mm-hmm.
for health is
Mm-hmm.
proliferating. And so that's why I'm very much focused on these other complementary businesses that can help us sift, sort, curate, personalize all of the new stuff that's going to be happening. AI is creating this proliferation of new things.
Yes.
And I think that's when you talk about technological advancement, it's the application that I think is interesting. And I use this kind of AI memory as a real immediate, like it's here. It's not even that far away.
Right.
Robotics, we don't spend a lot of time in robotics because the cost is still so expensive, and it's definitely working on medical devices. I grew up with the Jetsons and Rosie, who was the robotic butler. Like, I don't think we're going to have robots in our homes because of the cost,
Mm.
but I do think that there's an opportunity to use robotics. For example, there's a company that's a robot masseuse,
I've heard
and
great things about it,
I've
actually.
heard great things about it. And I just went to a longevity clinic this past weekend, and they had that exact same table, and clients are loving it.
Mm-hmm.
So some of this technology is not that far off.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know Primetime Partners has been big advocate in also funding older entrepreneurs, founders over 50. So I'd love for you to just talk about your track record there. Obviously, Alan Patricoff, your co-founder, was in his 80s, right, when you launched, and also what the success of ventures started by older founders looks like.
Yeah. Fast Company did a study with HBS, Harvard Business School, on the fact, and they revealed that founders over the age of, I think, 45 are like 3 to 1 more successful than younger founders. And,
Success measured how?
success measured in terms of exits.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really use that statistic all that often because anything, like there's noise in everything. But it goes to say that there should be a way to support founders who have experience, who have network, who have assets to bring to being an entrepreneur. And
Mm-hmm.
so while it is a definite goal of ours and 10% of our founders are over the age of 50, when we look at our deal flow of about 1,000 companies a year, a very much smaller percentage of founders are over the age of 50.
Oh.
And so I think part of that is a reflection of the fact that many older adults are small business owners, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that they're building venture backable businesses. So it doesn't mean they're not entrepreneurs. It
Yeah.
just means that they're building their business in a different way. And if you go to the Small Business Association, their fastest growing group of small business owners are people over the age of 50. And think about it, you're starting your own business,
Yeah, no,
right?
this resonates. I knew that I did not want to do a venture backed business. I'm 52 right now. I hope I have several more decades ahead of me. And I don't want to be retired for a long, long time. And so starting a small business was what really spoke to me. But again, not in that venture backed way, just something sustainable that I'm super passionate about. In this case, strength training for Healthspan. And I feel like now a lot calmer and more confident than I did when I was starting Well and Good. Like I don't feel as white knuckled as I sort of go through it all. So it's a different perspective for sure.
Yeah. And people talk about, how inclusive is the venture community and how do we promote underserved audiences across every dimension. And I think part of it is that a lot of older adults are just opting out to say, I don't want or need to be on that fast roller coaster of venture. So I think there's part of it. And then I think the other part is that it is really hard to get venture capital money, and that venture capitalists are looking for an archetype of the young person who works 20 hours a day and will grind this business. And so we definitely give extra looks and do what we can, partially by just even tracking the fact that 10% of our founders are over the age of 50. And so we're really trying to support that as a workspan option for entrepreneurial older adults. And last thing I'll say is we encourage each of our companies to bring on a co-founder or a senior person on their team who has experience.
We talked to Chip Conley in this series, who was the quote modern elder at Airbnb. And he gave some great perspective on that, and also touched on what you were saying earlier, whereas he actually defines middle age at starting at 35. So really interesting. So Abby, being in this host seat gives me great access to ask smart, thoughtful people like you about their own personal practices. I'd love to hear about what longevity practices you find most beneficial for yourself.
I'm sighing because, I'm a working mom with 3 teenage kids living in New York City. So do as I say, not as I do. But I would say the things that I have been prioritizing are, number one, finding quiet moments for that. I'm not a good meditator, but I completely understand the therapeutic benefits and the health benefits of meditation. I espouse it. I believe it. It's not a strength of mine, but breathing is. And so how I use yoga and breathing, I think, is real. Strength training for women. I'm 50. I've always been an athlete, but understanding how your fitness needs to change as you age, I think is something that I very much embrace. I drink a lot less.
Yeah, alcohol you're talking about, not water.
Yeah, not water. Alcohol. I drink a lot less. And not that I was ever a big drinker, but the deleterious effects and the long-standing effects are real. I went on hormone replacement therapy, not because I had very bad symptoms of menopause, but because the data correlating hormone deficiency and dementia is now acknowledged. Astounding. And I don't have the risk of cancer that might give some. This shouldn't prevent you from thinking about how to manage your hormones, but it definitely means different protocols. So I don't think I would have engaged in HRT had I not been in this space. And then I'm on the lookout. I've been through Cenegenics. I love the program. I think I'm trying to figure out what my proactive care quarterback looks like. I'm like many working moms that I prioritize everybody else's health above my own. So I think there's that. And then I think the most important thing I've done for longevity is to stay passionately and purposefully involved and engaged in learning in my career. And so I started the fund at age 45. This is my life's passion. I'm going to be doing this for the next 40 years.
Wow.
And when you think about a career that ahead of you of 4 more decades of doing this, how you think about that really changes in terms of the steps, the layers. So I think the best thing that anyone can do for their longevity is to have meaningful relationships and a purposeful work life, even if that work isn't paid work.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your perspective, the frame for your incredible fund and your life, and for all the great work that you're doing in supporting this generation of entrepreneurs.
I love what I do. And if any of the listeners want to share something they're working on, just reach out to me at abby@primetimepartners.com. We're always happy to engage with the community, as I really hope that in the next 40 years, we move the term longevity from being a vertical practice to being a horizontal capability that every wellness and medical professional thinks about. And so that really is the goal, is that this isn't a specialty,
Yeah.
that this becomes a reality across all of health and wellness.
Here's to that. Well, thanks for pulling up a chair to the Wellness Roundtable, Abby. And I hope to catch up with you in person soon.
Great to see you, Alexia. Thanks for the time.
Now we turn to David Stewart for his take on the over 50 consumer. David Stewart is the visionary and maestro behind Ageist and its sister brand, SuperAge, platforms that are revolutionizing the way we think about aging. Forget about traditional AARP retirement narratives. SuperAge and Ageist cater to high energy, high octane individuals who have no plans of fading quietly into their sunset years. I would love to dive into how you started Ageist 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had this pretty rocking career as a photographer. I was doing a lot of advertising. And what I found was in these ads, the people I'm taking pictures of, they're all staying the same age. And so I'm getting older. My friends are getting older. And I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of weird. And then when I look at the stuff in the media that was aimed at people my age, it was just horrible. It was this really medicalized pharma sort of stuff, ultimately infantilizing. There's the nice gray-haired couple and they're on the beach and they got the dog and they got the bike. They don't ride the bike because the bike, it's too dangerous for them. They walk the bike. And I thought, like, what up with that? So we started Ageist really in opposition to that stuff. So what we said was, you're stronger, you're braver, and you're more capable than you think you are. And the greatest impediment that you have is this poverty of imagination. And this poverty of imagination is being fed by all this nonsense that you're seeing out there on television or whatever. Like, come on. So that's where we started it.
Over that decade since you started Ageist, have you seen a shift in culture and in how this cohort is represented in media?
Massively. So, our first business model was B2B. So we had all this information. We understood this underserved demographic, what motivated them, what their ambitions were, how they saw their future. And so we were like, oh, this is really valuable. So we would call these companies up and we'd say, hey, we got this thing. And it was like, we had a disease they didn't want to catch. It was like, they could not run away from us fast enough. So that's different now. I remember Joan Didion did the Celine ad. So that was about, 10-ish years ago. And that was just like revolutionary at the time. Like, oh my God, here's this older, admittedly super cool, famous person in Celine. But you see a lot more of that now. So what we did with SuperAge was like, okay, we're going to be age agnostic on this. Because we realized what's happened in the last 10 years is the sort of health and wellness things that people focus on. As you get older, mortality becomes a bigger thing and gets more of your attention. But that has shifted way down the age column. So there are people in their 20s, I guess even in their teens, who are really concerned about their long-term health and wellness. And the ambitions and the sort of end target is a little different in the thinking of a 20-year-old than, say, a 70-year-old.
Totally. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you're covering in the mindset and what you presented in Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a big piece of research. It was about a year and a half ago in combination with a finance professor. And he came to us and he's like, you really seem to know about this wellness and age stuff. I know a lot about financial behavior. Let's interlace these things and see what this looks like. And so we put a lot of questions in there that were baffling to him. He's like, why do we care about this question about wearables? Why do we care about labels on food cans? And I said, because it's going to show where their mind is at. Are they looking forward? Are they looking back? Where are they at?
And just to understand, what was he looking to understand from this?
He thought there might be some sort of interaction between the way people view their wellness and how they deal with their finances. So are they saving money? Are they planning for retirement? How much? How worried are they? Things like that. He wasn't quite sure. There hadn't ever been any kind of a study like this. So we interlace these things. And when the data comes back, he's like, you're not going to believe this. He presented 180 slides. And if you've ever done one of these big data things, there's often some divergent, random variable, something that happens. There's no divergence. And where it all led towards was this idea of optimism. And what we found here was that in terms of wellness, it doesn't matter so much your access to resources or your knowledge base. These are important, but what really matters is what's your mindset? Are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? If you are pessimistic, I can give you all the resources and knowledge in the world. You're not going to do anything. You're just going to sit there because why would you do anything? Do you think nothing good is going to happen in the future? But if you're an optimist, you're going to plan, your behaviors are going to lead you towards positive long-term results. And we saw how this interlaced with finances, with wellness behavior. So, like people who wear a Whoop or they wear an Aura, they save a lot more money than people who don't. Who knew? People who if you see somebody in the grocery store and they're reading the label on the back of the can, this is an expression of optimism towards the future. And so all of their behaviors are going to be skewed in that direction. So if you work in the finance industry, you don't want to be dealing with pessimists because it's very hard to change their behavior. They're just like, well, why bother? And the same thing if you're in the wellness industry, you want optimists because they're the ones that are going to change their behavior. They're the ones that are going to have access to new products, new services, new things that can improve their lives. Because optimists, they're not frightened. Pessimists, you're constantly under threat, right? You're just like constantly in this sympathetic mode where you're fending things off. And so your mind closes down. You have reduced optionality, essentially. You only see like a few options, but the more optimistic you are, your parasympathetic nervous system is more activated and your range of view is wider. And so you're able to take in different opinions, different people, all kinds of different things. Those are the people you want.
So I think the mindset thing also applies to longevity because I think there are some people who are really excited about everything that's going on with longevity practices and technology. And then there's a whole cohort of people who just roll their eyes at it and think that it's, a billionaire's pursuit, right? And I think that probably aligns, I'm just spitballing, like with that optimist, pessimist point of view. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us at the Wellness Roundtable. And for everyone, where can they find you? Where can they find your publications?
Yes, absolutely. So number one, go to superage.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's fantastic. And then go to the OG, Ageist. Go to ageist.com and sign up for our every Thursday dispatch. It's really beautiful. You need that. And then we have a podcast called the Ageist Podcast. And we got a lot of social channels. You can find us there too.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Wellness Roundtable. This podcast was produced by Emily Roberts and Ali Alkiza of Over Lunch. Music was provided by Mindstream. And a very special thank you to Susie Ellis, Nancy Davis, and the entire Global Wellness Institute team. As we wrap, it's important to remember that while this podcast is filled with valuable insights about the latest longevity science and innovations, it is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Our conversations are designed to inform and inspire, but should not replace the personalized guidance of your healthcare providers. If today's episode sparked your interest, please subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with friends. To learn more about the Global Wellness Institute, please visit our website, globalwellnessinstitute.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.